What happens when the veil between dimensions grows thin and your consciousness traverses realms beyond the physical? Does the soul speak in languages older than human civilization itself, weaving messages through the tapestry of dreams that hold keys to your deepest transformation? Welcome, soul traveler, to the Eternal Library. Today we dive into one of the most profound and enigmatic communication systems that has been hidden beneath layers of modern psychological interpretation and reductive materialist thinking for centuries, the ancient art of dream decoding as practiced by the greatest mystics, shamans, and initiates throughout human history. 4,000 of years before Freud ever conceived of the unconscious or Jung spoke of archetypes, the masters of inner wisdom across every spiritual tradition understood that dreams were not merely random neurological firing or psychological wish fulfillment, but rather direct transmissions from the soul's deepest intelligence, messages from guides and teachers in non-physical realms, prophetic visions of future possibilities, and most importantly, precise diagnostic tools that revealed the exact state of one's spiritual development and the specific practices needed for the next stage of awakening. The Tibetan Dream Yoga tradition, preserved in texts like the 6 Yogas of Naropa and the Bardo Thodol, understood that the dream state was actually a rehearsal for the intermediate state between death and rebirth, teaching practitioners to maintain lucid awareness during sleep as preparation for conscious navigation of the afterlife realms, and their elaborate system of dream classification included prophetic dreams that revealed future incarnations, teaching dreams where enlightened masters would appear to transmit specific practices, purification dreams that showed the clearing of karmic obstacles, and integration dreams that confirmed the successful completion of various stages of tantric practice. In ancient Egypt, the temple priests of Serapis at Memphis operated dream incubation chambers where seekers would undergo purification rituals involving fasting, specific dietary preparations, and ceremonial bathing before sleeping in sacred spaces designed to amplify divine communication through dreams. And the surviving papyri reveal that Egyptian dream interpretation was far more sophisticated than modern approaches, recognizing that dreams contained multiple layers of meaning including literal prophetic information, symbolic guidance for spiritual practices, communications from deceased masters and guides, diagnostic information about physical and energetic imbalances, and instructions for specific magical operations or healing practices. The Hindu tradition preserves in texts like the Mandukya Upanishad and various tantric manuals a complete science of dream consciousness that recognizes 4 distinct states of awareness including Jagrat or waking consciousness, Swapna or dream consciousness, Sushupti or deep sleep, and Turiya or the witness consciousness that observes all 3 states, teaching that mastery of dream awareness was essential for realizing the illusory nature of all phenomenal experience and that specific practices performed in dreams could accelerate spiritual development more rapidly than the same practices performed in waking consciousness because the subtle energy body was more malleable and responsive during the dream state. The Islamic tradition of dream interpretation, codified in works like Ibn Sirin's Tafsir al-Ahlam, and drawing from prophetic traditions stating that dreams are 1/46th part of prophecy, developed elaborate systems for distinguishing between 3 types of dreams including Ruya or true dreams that came directly from Allah and contained guidance or prophetic information, Hulm or psychological dreams arising from personal desires and fears, and dreams inspired by shaitan or negative entities designed to create confusion or fear, with master interpreters spending decades studying the symbolic language specific to each dreamer's cultural context, spiritual development level, and karmic circumstances. The Hebrew mystical tradition preserved in Kabbalistic texts like the Sefer Yetzirah and Zohar understood dreams as communications from the neshama or higher soul, teaching that during sleep the soul would ascend through various heavenly palaces or Hekalot to receive teachings and guidance that would then be translated into symbolic language appropriate for the dreamer's level of consciousness, and they developed specific practices including pre-sleep meditations on Hebrew letters and divine names, dream incubation techniques involving sleeping with sacred texts under the pillow, and elaborate interpretation methods that decoded dreams according to gematria, the numerical values of Hebrew letters that appeared symbolically in dream narratives. The shamanic traditions of the Americas, from the Amazonian ayahuasqueros to the Plains Indian vision quest practitioners, understood that dreams were journeys of the soul into non-ordinary reality where communication with plant spirits, animal guides, ancestors, and cosmic forces provided essential information for healing, divination, and spiritual development, with master shamans training for decades to develop the ability to consciously navigate dream realms, retrieve lost soul parts, communicate with the spirits of deceased individuals, gather information about distant events, and receive specific instructions for healing ceremonies and plant preparations. The ancient Greek tradition of dream incubation at temples dedicated to Asclepios, the god of healing, involved elaborate purification protocols including specific dietary restrictions, ritual bathing in sacred springs, offerings to the deity, and sleeping in the abaton or sacred dormitory where healing dreams would provide both direct energetic healing and specific instructions for herbal remedies, lifestyle changes, and spiritual practices needed for complete recovery with surviving. Inscriptions revealing that these healing dreams often contained precise medical information that was unknown to the dreamer's conscious mind and proved remarkably effective when applied. The Chinese Taoist tradition, preserved in texts like the Zhuangzi and various alchemical manuals, recognized that during deep sleep the hun or ethereal soul would separate from the physical body and travel through various celestial realms, gathering information and energy that would influence the dreamer's spiritual development. And they developed specific practices including pre-sleep circulation of qi through particular meridian pathways, visualization techniques that would program the hun soul to visit specific teachers or sacred locations during dreams, and morning integration practices that would anchor the spiritual insights and energy received during nocturnal journeys into the physical and etheric bodies. The European alchemical tradition, exemplified in works by Paracelsus, John Dee, and various Rosicrucian texts, understood that dreams provided direct communication with what they termed the inner master, or higher genius, teaching that the symbolic language of dreams followed the same principles as alchemical symbolism and that mastery of dream interpretation was essential for successful completion of the great work, with specific practices including sleeping with alchemical symbols under the pillow, pre-sleep invocations to planetary spirits associated with particular types of guidance, and elaborate interpretation methods that decoded dream symbols according to elemental correspondences, planetary influences, and the stages of alchemical transformation. The Sufi tradition, preserved in works by masters like Ibn Arabi and Al-Ghazali, recognized dreams as one of the primary means through which the divine communicates with human consciousness, teaching that the heart's spiritual development could be measured by the clarity and frequency of true dreams, and they developed specific practices including particular dhikr or remembrance formulas recited before sleep, visualization techniques that would prepare consciousness for divine communication, and sophisticated interpretation methods that distinguish between dreams arising from the nafs or ego, dreams from the imagination, and true dreams that came directly from the realm of the unseen or gaib. Modern neuroscience has begun to validate many aspects of these ancient understandings, with researchers like Dr. Matthew Walker at UC Berkeley demonstrating that REM sleep plays crucial roles in memory consolidation, emotional processing, and creative problem solving, while studies on lucid dreaming by researchers like Dr. Stephen LaBerge have shown that conscious awareness during dreams can be developed through specific training techniques and that activities performed in lucid dreams can improve performance of the same activities in waking life, suggesting that the ancient understanding of dreams as practice grounds for spiritual development has significant scientific basis. However, the materialist interpretation of dreams as merely neurological phenomena fails to account for the extensive documentation of prophetic dreams, healing dreams that provide accurate medical information unknown to the dreamer, shared dreams between individuals separated by vast distances, and dreams that provide solutions to complex problems or creative inspiration that transforms entire fields of human knowledge, phenomena that have been consistently reported across all cultures and time periods and suggest that consciousness during sleep may indeed access information and guidance from sources beyond the individual brain. The ancient masters understood that effective dream interpretation required not merely intellectual analysis of symbols, but rather a complete transformation of consciousness that involved purification of the emotional and mental bodies, development of intuitive sensitivity, cultivation of reverence for the sacred dimensions of existence, and most importantly, establishment of a living relationship with one's guides and teachers in non-physical realms who could provide direct guidance in understanding the specific symbolic language being used in each dream. The Tibetan tradition teaches specific preliminary practices for developing dream awareness, including maintaining a dream journal to establish continuity of memory between sleeping and waking states, performing particular breathing exercises and visualizations before sleep that would enhance the clarity of dream consciousness, cultivating the recognition that all waking experience is equally illusory and dreamlike through contemplative practices performed throughout the day, and developing the ability to recognize dream signs or recurring elements that would trigger lucid awareness during sleep, with advanced practitioners eventually learning to maintain continuous awareness through all states of consciousness. The Egyptian tradition required extensive purification before attempting dream incubation, including fasting periods that would sensitize the subtle perception, ritual bathing that would cleanse the energetic field of psychic debris that could interfere with clear communication, specific dietary practices that would enhance the receptivity of the nervous system, and elaborate invocation ceremonies that would establish protection and invite the presence of beneficial guides and teachers who could facilitate accurate communication through dream symbolism. The Hindu tradition teaches that the quality and clarity of dreams directly reflects the practitioner's level of spiritual development, with beginners typically receiving dreams that address immediate practical concerns or emotional imbalances, intermediate practitioners beginning to receive teaching dreams where spiritual concepts are conveyed through symbolic narratives, and advanced practitioners eventually developing the ability to receive direct transmission of spiritual energy and knowledge through dream consciousness that would accelerate their awakening process beyond what could be achieved through waking practices alone. The Hebrew mystical tradition developed elaborate systems for preparing consciousness to receive divine communication through dreams, including specific combinations of Hebrew letters and divine names that would be contemplated before sleep, particular body positions and breathing patterns that would align the subtle energy with celestial influences, and morning practices involving the careful recording and analysis of dream content according to Kabbalistic principles of interpretation that would reveal multiple layers of meaning from the literal to the mystical. The Shamanic traditions emphasize that developing authentic dream awareness requires establishing proper relationship with the spirit world through specific protocols, including offering ceremonies that would invite the assistance of benevolent spirits, purification practices that would clear the dreamer's energy field of attachments or influences that could distort communication, and the cultivation of humility and respect for the intelligence and autonomy of the spiritual beings who choose to communicate through dreams rather than approaching dream work as a technique to be mastered for personal gain. The practical application of these ancient methods begins with understanding that dreams operate according to a symbolic language that is simultaneously universal in its archetypal foundations and completely personal in its specific manifestations, requiring the development of both scholarly knowledge of traditional symbol systems and intuitive sensitivity to the unique ways that one's own psyche and guides choose to communicate. The universal symbols include water, which typically represents the realm of emotions and the unconscious mind but can also indicate purification, baptism, or the flow of spiritual energy depending on its specific appearance and the dreamer's associations, with clear flowing water suggesting emotional clarity and spiritual vitality, while muddy or stagnant water might indicate emotional confusion or energetic blockages requiring attention. Animals in dreams typically represent instinctual energies, spiritual guides, or aspects of the unconscious mind, with each species carrying specific traditional associations, such as the snake representing kundalini energy, wisdom, or transformation, the eagle representing spiritual vision and connection to higher realms, the wolf representing the wild, untamed aspects of the psyche that need integration, and domestic animals often representing familiar patterns of behavior or relationship, dynamics that may need examination or transformation. Flying dreams traditionally indicate the soul's natural capacity to transcend physical limitations and may represent spiritual liberation, astral projection experiences, or the development of higher perceptual abilities, though the specific quality of the flight experience provides important diagnostic information about the dreamer's spiritual development, with effortless soaring suggesting advanced spiritual attainment, while difficulty maintaining flight might indicate spiritual practices or lifestyle changes needed to support higher states of consciousness. Death in dreams rarely refers to literal physical death, but rather represents the completion of one phase of spiritual development and the beginning of another, with the specific circumstances of the dream death providing guidance about what aspects of the personality, behavior patterns, or belief systems need to be released to allow for the next stage of growth. And dreams involving the death of known individuals often represent the dreamer's changing relationship to the qualities or energies that person represents rather than any prophetic information about their physical well-being. Sexual imagery in dreams typically relates to the integration of masculine and feminine energies within the psyche, the union of conscious and unconscious elements, or the activation of creative and spiritual forces, with the specific context and emotional tone providing important information about the dreamer's relationship to their own creative power, spiritual energy, and capacity for intimate connection with others and the divine. Buildings and structures in dreams often represent the psyche itself or the dreamer's spiritual development, with houses typically symbolizing the personality structure, temples or churches representing sacred aspects of consciousness, schools indicating areas where learning or growth is needed, and hospitals suggesting healing work that needs attention, while the condition of the building provides diagnostic information about the dreamer's psychological and spiritual health. The process of developing authentic dream interpretation ability requires several years of consistent practice, beginning with the establishment of a dream journal that captures not only the narrative content of dreams but also the emotional quality, physical sensations, colors, sounds, and any other sensory information that might provide additional layers of meaning, with the journal serving both as a record for pattern recognition and as a demonstration to the unconscious mind and spiritual guides that the dreamer values and pays attention to the communications being offered. The traditional practice involves recording dreams immediately upon awakening before the rational mind has opportunity to edit or modify the original experience, writing in present tense to maintain the immediacy and energy of the dream state, and including personal associations with dream symbols rather than immediately consulting external sources for interpretation, since the specific meaning of any symbol depends largely on the dreamer's personal and cultural associations with that image or experience. The development of pattern recognition skills involves regular review of dream journals to identify recurring symbols, themes, characters, and situations that may represent ongoing spiritual lessons or guidance, with particular attention to symbols or experiences that evoke strong emotional responses, since these often indicate areas where significant healing or growth work is needed, and the tracking of correlations between dream content and subsequent waking life events that may validate the prophetic or guidance aspects of particular dreams. The ancient traditions emphasize that authentic dream interpretation requires the development of what the Sufis term the eye of the heart, a form of spiritual perception that can intuitively grasp the essential meaning behind symbolic appearances, and this capacity is developed through regular spiritual practice including meditation, prayer, ethical conduct, and service to others that purifies the consciousness and enhances its receptivity to subtle spiritual communications. The Tibetan tradition teaches specific visualization and breathing practices that can be performed before sleep to enhance dream clarity and increase the likelihood of receiving teaching dreams, including the visualization of particular enlightened beings or spiritual symbols at the heart center while reciting specific mantras, the circulation of breath and energy through particular chakras or energy centers that correspond to different types of spiritual guidance, and the cultivation of specific intentions or questions that can be offered to one's guides and teachers before entering sleep. The Egyptian tradition involved elaborate preparation rituals performed in sacred spaces designed to amplify spiritual communication, including the burning of specific incenses that would purify the energetic environment and invoke the presence of particular deities or guides, the placement of sacred objects such as ankhs, scarabs, or images of protective deities around the sleeping area, specific body positions that would align the subtle energy with celestial influences, and pre-sleep recitation of particular prayers or invocations that would establish protection and invite beneficial communication from the realm of the Netaru or divine principles. The Hindu tradition teaches that the practice of yoga nidra or conscious sleep can bridge the gap between waking and dream consciousness, allowing practitioners to maintain awareness during the transition into sleep and potentially influence the content and quality of dreams through specific visualizations and intentions, while advanced pranayama or breathing practices performed before sleep can enhance the sensitivity of the subtle body and increase its receptivity to spiritual guidance and energy transmission during the dream state. The Hebrew mystical tradition developed specific practices involving the contemplation of particular combinations of Hebrew letters and divine names before sleep, with different letter combinations associated with different types of guidance such as healing, spiritual development, relationship guidance, or prophetic information about future events. And the tradition teaches that the soul's capacity to receive clear divine communication through dreams depends on the practitioner's level of ethical conduct, spiritual practice, and devotion to serving the divine will rather than personal ego desires. The shamanic traditions emphasize that working with dreams requires proper preparation of both the physical and energetic environment, including the cleansing of the sleeping space with sage, cedar, or other sacred plants, the placement of protective objects such as crystals, feathers, or medicine bundles around the sleeping area, specific dietary practices that enhance spiritual sensitivity such as fasting or avoiding certain foods that could dull perception, and pre-sleep ceremonies that invoke the protection and guidance of specific spirits, ancestors, or power animals who serve as allies in navigating non-ordinary reality. The integration of dream guidance into daily life represents perhaps the most crucial aspect of authentic dream work, since the ancient traditions understood that dreams were meant to provide practical guidance for spiritual development and service rather than mere entertainment or psychological curiosity. And this integration requires the development of discernment to distinguish between dreams that provide genuine guidance and those that may arise from personal desires, fears, or psychological processing, as well as the courage to act upon authentic guidance even when it challenges existing beliefs, lifestyle patterns, or social expectations. The Tibetan tradition teaches specific practices for integrating dream insights, including morning meditation sessions where dream content is contemplated in light of Buddhist teachings about the nature of reality and the path to enlightenment, specific analytical techniques that examine dream experiences for evidence of spiritual progress or areas needing attention, and the application of dream guidance to daily spiritual practices such as modifying meditation techniques, adjusting ethical conduct, or deepening devotion and compassion practices based on insights received during sleep. The Egyptian tradition involved elaborate morning rituals performed in temple settings where dream content would be shared with trained priest interpreters who could provide additional insight and guidance for integrating dream messages into daily life, with particular attention to dreams that provided healing information, prophetic warnings, or instructions for specific magical or spiritual practices that could benefit not only the individual dreamer but also the broader community served by the temple complex. The Hindu tradition teaches that authentic dream guidance should always align with and support the fundamental principles of dharma or righteous living, and that any dream guidance that contradicts ethical conduct, spiritual development, or service to others should be regarded with suspicion as potentially arising from ahankara or ego-driven desires rather than genuine spiritual guidance. While dreams that inspire greater devotion, compassion, wisdom, or service can generally be trusted as authentic communications from higher aspects of consciousness or enlightened guides and teachers. The Hebrew mystical tradition emphasizes that the integration of dream guidance requires careful study of sacred texts and consultation with qualified teachers who can help distinguish between authentic divine communication and personal psychological projections, since the symbolic language of dreams often parallels the symbolic language of scripture and mystical texts, and the tradition teaches that genuine prophetic dreams will always ultimately serve the purposes of tikkun olam, or repairing the world through acts of justice, compassion, and spiritual service. The shamanic traditions teach that dream guidance often requires concrete actions in the physical world, such as performing specific ceremonies, seeking out particular teachers or healing practitioners, making offerings to spirits or ancestors, or undertaking vision quests or other intensive spiritual practices, and that the validity of dream guidance can often be confirmed through synchronicities, signs in nature, or validation from other spiritual practitioners who were not aware of the dream content. The development of advanced dream awareness ultimately leads to what various traditions describe as conscious dreaming, lucid dreaming, or dream yoga, where the practitioner maintains full awareness during the dream state and can consciously direct dream experiences for specific spiritual purposes, including healing work, communication with deceased teachers or guides, exploration of future possibilities, retrieval of lost soul parts or spiritual energy, and direct transmission of healing or spiritual energy to others who may be physically distant. The Tibetan tradition of dream yoga represents perhaps the most sophisticated development of these advanced capacities, teaching practitioners to recognize dream signs that trigger lucid awareness, maintain continuous consciousness through the transition from waking to sleeping states, consciously alter dream environments and experiences for specific spiritual purposes, practice advanced tantric techniques during dream states that would be impossible or dangerous in physical reality, and ultimately transcend the distinction between dreaming and waking consciousness through the recognition that both states are equally illusory manifestations of the same underlying awareness. The Egyptian tradition included advanced practices performed by temple priests who could consciously enter the dreams of others to provide healing, guidance, or protection, travel through dream states to gather information about distant events or future possibilities, and maintain communication with deceased masters and guides who would continue to provide teaching and guidance through dream encounters that were as vivid and instructive as physical meetings. The Hindu tradition teaches that masters of dream yoga can consciously visit various lokas or planes of existence during sleep, communicate directly with devas, ancestors, and enlightened beings, perform healing work on the subtle energy bodies of others through shared dream experiences, and even transfer consciousness completely out of the physical body during sleep as preparation for the final transition at death, with some advanced practitioners reportedly maintaining continuous awareness through the death process and consciously choosing their next incarnation based on information gathered during these out-of-body dream journeys. The Hebrew mystical tradition speaks of tzaddikim or righteous individuals who could receive direct prophetic revelations through dreams, travel through various heavenly palaces or hekalot during sleep to receive advanced teachings unavailable in physical reality, and serve as channels for divine healing energy that could be transmitted to others through shared dream experiences or through the tzaddik's prayers and spiritual practices performed while in prophetic dream states. The shamanic traditions include master practitioners who can consciously shapeshift into animal forms during dream states, travel instantaneously to distant locations to gather information or provide healing, journey to the upper world to receive guidance from celestial teachers, visit the underworld to retrieve lost soul parts or negotiate with spiritual forces affecting their communities, and maintain communication with plant spirits, ancestors, and cosmic forces through regular dream journeys that provide ongoing guidance for their healing and ceremonial work. The integration of these advanced capacities into daily life requires years of dedicated spiritual practice, ethical conduct that earns the trust and cooperation of spiritual guides and teachers, and ultimately a complete surrender of personal ego desires in service of divine will and the well-being of all sentient beings. Since the ancient traditions consistently teach that authentic spiritual abilities are granted not for personal aggrandizement but for service to the greater good and the evolution of consciousness itself. The warning aspects that all authentic spiritual traditions emphasize regarding dream work include the recognition that not all dreams come from beneficial sources, and that practitioners must develop discernment to distinguish between dreams that provide authentic spiritual guidance and those that may arise from psychological projections, external psychic influences, or negative entities that seek to create confusion, fear, or spiritual pride that could derail genuine spiritual development. The Tibetan tradition teaches specific protection practices including pre-sleep refuge prayers that invoke the protection of enlightened beings, visualization techniques that create protective light spheres around the sleeping practitioner, and daily ethical conduct that naturally repels negative influences while attracting beneficial guidance from enlightened sources. The Egyptian tradition involved elaborate purification protocols and protective amulets that would shield the dreamer from malevolent spiritual influences while creating optimal conditions for beneficial divine communication. And temple priests were trained to recognize the signs of negative psychic interference and perform specific rituals to clear such influences from individuals seeking dream guidance. The Hindu tradition emphasizes that practitioners should never approach dream work from motivation of personal gain, power, or curiosity alone, since such motivations naturally attract delusional or negative influences, and teaches that authentic dream guidance will always encourage greater devotion to the divine, ethical conduct, selfless service, and spiritual practices that purify consciousness rather than inflate ego or encourage spiritual materialism. The Hebrew mystical tradition teaches that practitioners must maintain strict ethical conduct and regular study of sacred texts to develop the discernment necessary to distinguish between authentic divine communication and psychological projections or negative spiritual influences, and emphasizes that genuine prophetic dreams will always ultimately serve the purposes of justice, compassion, and spiritual truth rather than personal desires or ambitions. The shamanic traditions include elaborate protection protocols involving specific plants, crystals, ceremonies, and spirit allies that shield practitioners from negative entities or confused souls who might attempt to influence dream content for harmful purposes. And master shamans are trained to perform specific cleansing and protection rituals for individuals whose dream experiences show signs of negative psychic interference or attachment. The contemporary application of these ancient dream decoding methods requires careful integration with modern understanding of psychology and neuroscience, recognizing that some dream content may indeed arise from psychological processing, memory consolidation, or neurological factors while remaining open to the possibility that other dreams may provide authentic spiritual guidance, prophetic information, or communication from non-physical sources, and developing the discrimination to distinguish between these different types of dream experiences based on their specific qualities, consistency with authentic spiritual principles, and the fruits they produce in terms of spiritual development and service to others. The scientific validation of various aspects of ancient dream knowledge continues to emerge through research on topics such as lucid dreaming, the role of sleep in creative problem solving, the correlation between dream content and subsequent life events, and the documented cases of shared dreams, prophetic dreams, and healing dreams that suggest consciousness during sleep may indeed access information and guidance from sources beyond the individual brain, providing increasing support for the Ancient understanding that dreams represent one of the primary ways that higher spiritual intelligence communicates with human consciousness. Thank you, soul traveler, for joining this exploration of the nocturnal mysteries that bridge the worlds of matter and spirit.